the Executive Committee of the National Security Council, because nobody knows what is going to happen if there will be a confrontation between the two most powerful navies very close to our area. And we talked of possible scenarios. I'll just shortcut this. The first question is, will the US really send their warships and aircraft within 12 nautical miles? Why 12 nautical miles? Because under UNCLOS, a real island has territorial sea of about 12 nautical miles. The US, the Philippines are not recognizing that the reclaimed areas are islands because they started as submerged features, and even if they constructed something on top of the features, they remain, as far as international law is concerned, as submerged and cannot have territorial sea. So the next question is, if that happens, what would be the most likely response of China? See, we all waited, and finally, the US sent their destroyer that passed the islands, two islands in the South China Sea. One in Subic, very close to Pag-asa, and the other one, mischief-free. What did China do? Nothing. But they said they shadowed the US destroyer, but they exercised restraint, which is good for peace. But China issued a warning about this, that it is considered a threat to China's sovereignty. And it provoked a lot of anger in Beijing. But a bully confronted by a bigger bully, their strongest reaction was to summon the US ambassador to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of China, just like how we do it in the Philippines. China summons US ambassador to protest ship near reef. And China also issued, and this is a realistic warning, that this can trigger a minor incident that could spark a war in the South China Sea. These are big boys confronting each other. How did the rest of the world, especially Asia, react to the US Navy patrol? Well, number one, the Philippines offered the most full-throated support, expression of support. Australia, the same thing. They endorsed the right of the US and all nations to freedom of navigation. So you can see the emerging coalition here. Japan, Prime Minister Shinzo Abe also expressed support for the US move. And Japan promised to cooperate with international society, including the United States, our ally, as according to Abe. But the other regional stakeholders were a little quiet. Taiwan was quiet, Indonesia voiced a little public endorsement. There was no immediate reaction from Vietnam, Malaysia, or India at first. But Vietnam later asked the President Xi not to militarize the South China Sea. Japan said that there's a dangerous game going on in the South China Sea. And the White House advisor said the US activity in the South China Sea will continue. And of course, the other good news is that the Philippines won the first round in the Permanent Court of Arbitration in The Hague. I think we're all aware of this. They issued a release saying that the tribunal found that they're going to hear 7 of Manila's submissions under UNCLOS. And this is good news because they're going to use as a basis UNCLOS. If they use UNCLOS as a basis, we have a very good chance of winning there. They have 7, they're going to look at our assertions in Panatag, the Scarborough, Panganiban Reef, that Mischief Reef, Gaben Reef, Makenan Reef, Mabini Reef, and then preventing our fishermen from fishing in the area, violating their obligations under UNCLOS, China, and China's violation of obligations under UNCLOS by operating the law enforcement vessels in a dangerous manner. And other interesting thing is that they're also looking and going to consider the merits of letter B. This is the most important, letter B. China's 9-dash line claim in the South China Sea, which we said should be declared invalid. They're going to look at this, they're going to review this, and the review will be starting on November 24. if we succeed in doing this, this is going to destroy all their claims in the South China Sea. This will push their borders all the way to Hainan and give us what we deserve, which is our exclusive economic zone unimpeded. But the winner here, if we win, is not only going to be the Philippines, but Malaysia will win because they have the same claim and the same counterclaim they're facing from China. Vietnam is going to be the winner, and the whole world will be a winner because most of the South China Sea is considered the global commons. In other words, nobody owns it, everybody owns it, just like a park in a village. But of course, China is saying we will not accept the Hague sovereignty arbitration. That is their mantra. They keep on saying we are not going to recognize that. We are not going to participate. They just shrugged off the UN Tribunal's initial ruling. But the Singapore Law Watch issued a statement also, and I quote, instead of hurling political rhetoric at the tribunal, China would be more productive if it attempts to make a legal rebuttal and argue why it feels that Article 288 does not apply in their case. Otherwise, what the world will see, and I'd like to reiterate this, the world will see is a country that claims to defend international law while flouting it when a ruling goes against its interests. That's a sore loser, not an upholder of law. And China cannot ignore the tribunal because there's going to be a big international pressure. They'll be portrayed as an international outlaw if they refuse to honor the decision of the arbitral tribunal, should it decide in favor of the Philippines. You can imagine already Japan will go there, India will go there, the US will go there, Australia will go there and wave that piece of paper coming from the arbitral tribunal telling China that they have no business claiming the South China Sea. The US issued a statement saying that the Hague Tribunal should be binding on China. I think this statement is a foreboding of what the US will do in case we get a favorable decision. There's a shift in ASEAN against China's buildup. Seoul, even very recently, at first they were quiet, but they also called for South China Sea rights. European Union backs the US on the South China Sea. And in a symbolic gesture, in spite of the warning from China, what the US did was to send in, not that close, but close enough, their aircraft carrier, the Theodore Roosevelt. And on board the Theodore Roosevelt was the Secretary of Defense of Malaysia. And very aptly, the name of the nickname of the aircraft carrier is Big Stick. You remember what Theodore Roosevelt said, speak softly, but carry a big stick. European Council also supported, G7 also supported. Now, one of my final observations is the political interference in the record of China. There's a recent bookseller, The 100-Year Marathon. And that 100-Year Marathon, authored by Michael Pillsbury, who's an expert on China. In fact, he was very supportive of China's economic development, thinking that an economically mature and developed China would become a much softer China, a more gentle China. But the reverse happened because China now appears to be using their economic power in order to bully their neighbors. In that book, the author found out that in the US Senate, they uncovered an attempt as early as 1996 by the Chinese to directly influence the US political process. This was when the US was overwhelmingly much more powerful and when China was not that wealthy yet. This was before the rise of China. And furthermore, that they found out that the Chinese have been going to several countries, identifying in those foreign countries policymakers into various categories, depending on who they believe will be promotive of their interests, will be sympathetic to their interests. And major Chinese embassies formed friendship committees to identify, track individuals, evaluating key politicians, business leaders, media figures in each of the national capital. and situating them on a spectrum ranging from friendly to hostile. The book did not mention whether China was doing it in the Philippines. Nobody knows. And the Chinese refer to those considered sympathetic as China's dear friends. So now we have to look out for China's dear friends, maybe in our vicinity. Now we have APEC. And very sadly, there was a joint statement made by the Department of Foreign Affairs, Malacanang, and Foreign Minister Wang Yi of China, that they're not going to talk about the South China Sea. That we, as gracious hosts, are going to avoid talking about a nasty topic that might irritate our guest, China. So our organization, Marcha, issued this statement. We call on APEC leaders to speak up on the West Philippine Sea issue and to discuss it during the summit. We feel that the South China Sea situation is not just a security problem. It is a big economic issue. Number one, about $5 trillion worth of trade passes through the South China Sea every year. That's a huge chunk of trade, probably the biggest chunk of trade all over the world. And any obstacles to the freedom of navigation there will also be an obstacle to free trade. Second, I talked already about what is happening there as far as the coral reefs are concerned. Food is a very vital economic issue, food security. And I already mentioned that 10% of the fish stocks in the world can be found in the South China Sea. 300 million persons are dependent on their livelihood on the South China Sea. And if China will misappropriate for themselves the South China Sea, it would displace about 300 million persons, including several millions in the Philippines. That's why we issued this manifesto addressed to the various leaders who are coming here, 21 of them. And the highlight of the manifesto is basically that they should discuss the West Philippine Sea, South China Sea issue, that they should condemn China's 9-dash line, that they should call the Chinese government to halt its reclamation project, and that China should uphold international law, that China should be urged to participate in the ongoing arbitration process initiated by the Philippines. So we issued that manifesto. We don't know whether they're going to listen, but I have a feeling that at least two countries, maybe not the Philippines because of its very difficult situation of being the host, but my feeling is that Japan and the USA will push the body to discuss the South China Sea issue because it's a very vital economic issue. And talking of economics, some sectors are saying that we should go bilateral, that we should give priority to economic relationships with China. It's a good point. You know, we have to continue the trade. In spite of the conflict, there must be trade. But we should not sacrifice our sovereignty, our territory, because of trade, in spite of the attraction of the maritime silk trade, the $10 trillion trade that they're expecting in the coming years with China's proposal that we should forget about the territorial conflict and focus on trade. But the problem, when they're saying that, they're occupying our area. If there was no occupation, then there would be no problem. We can talk about the trade anytime. So my answer to that, whether we should think business or think of the country, is this.
Mapapalawak natin ang ating ekonomiya kung makikipagkalaban tayo sa negosyo o kalayaan, bayan o sariling pumili ka! Mapapalawak natin ang ating ekonomiya kung makikipagkalaban tayo sa kanila. Negosyo o kalayaan, bayan o sariling pumili ka!
So kayong mga certified public accountants, alam ko gusto nyo negosyo eh. Siyempre, more business, better for the CPAs. But I also posed the question, negosyo o kalayaan, bayan o sarili, pumili tayo. Maraming salamat sa inyo lahat.
meeting in the interest